Howdy, 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 and welcome to the Snort Cast. My name is Nina Nguyen, and I am the creator and a snorter on the show. And thank you so much for joining us twice a week, speaking to comedians and funny people all around the world, talking about their funny. And as you know, every time I do this show, I would love to find out where you are snorting from. If you can put in the comments where you're snorting from, we would love to know where you're snorting live or on replay. So make sure you put replay or live so that I know where my audience are watching from. I would like to acknowledge the land that I stand on, the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So the SnortCast, you know, it's a show about people talking about the funny, and it's something I've learned during this pandemic is that we're really good at watching stand-up and watching shows, but we never really find out the process of how to be funny. So it's really great that we have our guest today, Nina, coming on to talk about her processes and how she became funny to be who she is now. And she's popping. I saw her show last year, but before I bring her on, I have started this new initiative, which is I want to pay it forward. And every month I will be focusing on a charity. So pay it forward. This month I'm focusing on September, which is a cerebral palsy awareness organization. And in September, their goal is that everyone does 10K steps a day. I think 10 steps a day. That's 10,000 steps a day. That's it. And I'm raising money because, as you know, I'm a mover and shaker. I dance a lot. And I really believe that if we can raise more money awareness, we can help children who have cerebral palsy. And it is a childhood, so they are born with cerebral palsy, and the money raised will help with awareness and with equipment for children who have cerebral palsy. So please check out that information. And also, if you are a supporter of the show, make sure you want to be a Patreon supporter. Click on www.patreon.com/realDinahWin. And if you are following us on our socials, we are at the SnortCast or hashtag the SnortCast. And we would love for you to follow us all across our social media so you're updated on our next guest that comes onto the show. Whew. So the SnortCast. We have our guest. She is our 16th guest in the last 2 months. I know we're steamrolling with the snorting at the moment. And her name is Nina Oyama. I met her last year at a show, and she was nominated for Best Newcomer Award at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Sold out, and I was able to get one of the last tickets to her last show that she performed. She's been performing stand-up since high school and has taken her all around Australia, and is currently a writer on Adult Swim YOLO, Crystal Fantasy, and co-host. Recently was appointed co-host of the Chaser Report podcast. And just in the last couple of days, and she didn't even know how it all became announced, but she was shortlisted for the Melbourne Webfest ABC iView selection with Claire Kavanagh, with a show called Midlife Christmas. You could check it out at the Melbourne Webfest. And before we bring her on, I want to show you her work so you get to know and see her funny. So I just share this clip.
Oh my God, I didn't expect so much applause. This is really cool. Yeah, it's really cool. I love Sydney. I love living here. But before I moved to Sydney, I lived in Bathurst. Has anyone heard of Bathurst? All right. Yeah, Bathurst is it's famous for the car racing, you know, like the Bathurst 1000 races, and less famous for the Bathurst 1000 racists. Right. Oh, I'm half Asian, by the way. That's why my face is weird. Yeah, my dad's Japanese, so he flew here, he blew here, and then I grew here. That's how it works. Anyway. I moved to Bathurst to go to university there, and I was there for 3 years. But in my first year, my first assignment was to go downtown and find out what the locals thought were the real issues. right? And it's kind of terrifying. It's like a new place, and we went to the furthest pub away from the town. And the first guy we talked to was like, "You know what I reckon?" It's like a great way to start a conversation. And he goes, "You know what I reckon? I reckon Pauline Hanson should be president of Australia." And I was just like, oh my God, like this guy is so progressive. You know, like not only does he want Australia to be a republic, like he also wants a woman in charge. I mean, it is Pauline Hanson, but like baby steps, you guys. Baby steps. When I was in Bathurst, I tried meth for the first time.
Nina.
Hello. Oh my God, hey, sorry. I thought the clip was still playing. Hello, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining the SnortCast.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
And as you already see, you're hilarious. You're cutting. I would have to say, there's no filter.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say.
Can you tell us more about you? Who are you?
Who am I? That is a very philosophical question. My name's Nina Oyama. I'm a 27-year-old stand-up comedian, writer, actor, director. I don't know. From Sydney, Australia. I'm half Japanese, as you heard in the clip. My dad's Japanese and mum's Australian. And I live in Sydney. Did I already say that? Yeah. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and also you recently became a co-host for the Chaser Report podcast.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I'll do my bio. So I am a co-host on the Chaser Report, which is a podcast with Dominic Knight and Charles Firth, who are from an Australian comedy group called The Chaser. You may have heard of them if you're Australian. If you're not Australian, you may not have heard of them. But our episodes come out every Friday, and it's a fun little political satire show. And then on top of that, I write for a show that just came out in the US called YOLO Crystal Fantasy. It's an animated show by Michael Cusack, who Australians might know because he created the animated series See But Brain, and also Koala Man, and who international people might know because he did Rick and Morty's Bushworld Adventures, where he took Rick and Morty and made it Australian and weird and crazy. But here's his brand new show. It's called YOLO Crystal Fantasy. It just dropped in the US, and you can watch the first 2 episodes in Australia on the Adult Swim website.
Fantastic. And you've done a shout out to the US, and we'll do a shout out to the people who are watching. We've got Pakistan, we've got Sydney, we've got India, we've got Dubai. Thanks for joining the show. Indonesia.
Hello. Oh, wow.
South Africa, Argentina. So we're hitting the US zone. Anyone from the US, holla, because Nina's work is available to be seen globally.
Oh, no, don't worry. If you're not from the US, I don't care. Fuck those guys.
And how was it to get the gig for the Chaser Report? That's huge.
So I've worked with The Chaser, which I said is like a very famous Australian political comedy group. I started working in political satire when I was like 19 years old. I was on a podcast called Irrational Fear, which is a political satire podcast. And I did very well on that show. And so they let me write for the podcast. And then after that, I met a few people. And when I was in university, I needed to do an internship in order to get marks or whatever. And I put on Facebook, I was like, can anyone help me find a job for a little while so I can get these marks? And someone from Irrational Fear reached out to me, and they put me in touch with the Chaser people, who let me be an intern on the Chaser's Media Circus. So that was one of their TV shows. And then when the Chaser was covering the Australian election in 2016, they had another show called the Chaser's Election Desk, which was, the premise was there was a giant desk that went all around the studio. And I was lucky enough to be a writer on that show. And so, and then after that, I wrote on a TV show called Tonightly, which was in Australia. It was like the Australian version of The Daily Show. And then after that, people thought that I was okay at writing political satire. And so I ended up on the Chasers podcast.
Holy shit, I didn't know all that backstory. That is huge. And
I've been around the block.
people
I've been on the street hustling my entire life.
And, you know, we're talking about hustling. If you had to write a book about your life, what would the title of the book be called as a 27-year-old?
God, I feel like as a 27-year-old, like my life has. You can't write a book when you're 27 years old. I think if you wrote a book about your life when you're 27 years old, unless you had something like insanely crazy and traumatic happen to you at a very young age, I feel like it's not warranted. I feel like I don't have, you know, like when you're 27, you're still so young. I'm just trying to say that I'm young. But I feel like you don't have the wherewithal to self-reflect properly when you're 27. But if I did have to write a book, it would be called Oyama Drama, because my name's Nina Oyama and I like the way it rhymes.
Yep, no, I think you've got it, because I saw your show last year and it highlighted a lot about your parking fines, living in Bathurst, which you've talked in your stand-up on Tom Ballard's show. Yeah, there's a bit of drama in that show.
Oh, yes. So the show that Diana's talking about was called Nina Oyama Needs a Lift. And that's a pun because the show is about how I'm a terrible driver and I had 13 driving offenses. And so it was like a good festival show because I would tell a story and then I would talk about my driving offenses and then I would tell another story and then get through 13 different driving offenses.
Yes, I loved it.
So that's, yeah, it was very real and I owed a lot of money to the government, which I paid off. Thank you to Centrelink payment plans. But yeah, that was a lot of drama in that show. And it was called Nina Oyama Needs a Lift because I obviously was not allowed to drive because I got so many driving fines. And then I needed a lift places. But also it was a show about how I like kind of, you know, really fell off the horse a little bit in my life. And then I had to get a lift and get back on it.
Beautiful. And you know what? I just was reminded of your show. What I really loved about your performance was that you would do like a kick after a joke. You know, I don't remember. I remember this shit. But you would just sort of like, huh. And I just loved it because it kicked us back into the story. And was that the part of the lift? I don't know.
So that was basically every time I got a driving fine, a riff would play from a song called I Love to Say Fuck by the Murder Dolls. Sorry for swearing, but I have to because it was in my show.
Go.
But the song, it's called I Love to Say Fuck, and the riff goes, no, fuck. And so whenever I got a driving fine in the show, that signified that if that sound played, it meant I got a fine and I would have to talk about it.
Bam, love it.
And sometimes I would dance to that song, and I think that's what you're talking about.
And what is your first memory of comedy? Because you've talked about, you know, doing comedy in high school, but what was the first childhood memory of, hey, I actually like this?
So my first memory of like consuming comedy, I guess I didn't really get into comedy until I was maybe like 15. Before that, I was a very humorless person. And I had no idea what was going on most of the time. But I started like basically just watching a lot of British TV shows like the IT Crowd and the Mighty Boosh. And I also watched Big Fat Quiz of the Year, which was one of their really big panel shows with like Noel Fielding and Jimmy Carr. And then from that, so I had a little iPod. Do you remember those iPods that were about this big? They were kind of a little bit fatter than the normal ones, and they had a little screen that was that big. So I would download comedy videos from YouTube and I would upload them to this iPod. And because it was like 256 megabytes, it wouldn't take very much. So I probably would only be able to have like 3 or 4 videos on there at a time. But because I would only have 3 videos or whatever, I would watch them and like memorize them. And I think that's where I really enjoyed comedy. And then at some point down the line, I got a better iPod that could store more videos. And I started downloading. Yeah, it was good. It was cute. It was a purple one, but it was one of these ones.
Yes.
So first it was one of these ones, and then I got one of these ones. My friends got me one for my birthday, which was really nice. I think they all put in like $10 or something. So then I started watching this channel called College Humor, which is still on today, collegehumor.com. Mm-hmm. And they would upload regular videos to iTunes that were all sketch comedy, like really tight sketch comedy. And again, like I just downloaded them all and just watched them like thousands of times. And I think at some point I was like, this seems like a viable career option. And I mean, like all these people have made money from it. So at some point I was like, maybe I should try stand up and maybe I will get paid to write silly jokes.
No, I love it. And I love that you get paid. That's the glory, isn't it?
It's really the dream. I do get paid a lot. I just want to preface with that. Like, really, I'm not like a millionaire. My room is you can literally see my room. It is very small. That's my closet. That's my bed. My desk is like so small. It's really terrible. But it's a living. It's a living.
Who inspires your comedy? You said Jimmy Carr when you was first consuming comedy, but who inspires your comedy now?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I'm someone that like doesn't watch stand-up that much now because I feel like I watch it anyway when I'm at gigs. I always watch people and I just feel like I'm surrounded by it constantly. So when I get home, I don't really watch comedy. But my favorite comedians now are Ali Wong, of course. I mean, it's a given. And Kyle Kinane is probably my favorite comedian from America. So they're probably my favorite two American comedians. Australian comedians, I love Celia Paccola and Kitty Flanagan. I love Sam Campbell as well, and Greg Larson and Anne Edmonds. So these are all names. I feel like they're probably not making any sense right now, but Kyle Kinane is someone. Ali Wong's very famous because she had the Netflix special where she was pregnant, and Kyle Kinane is someone that, I don't know, he's just a funny Canadian dude. He speaks in a very funny cadence. He's always like, I'm Kyle Kinane. I don't know. I can't do it justice, but he's very funny. And he does a lot of philosophical jokes. And then it like turns out he's talking about trucks or something. I don't know. It's funny to me. It doesn't, I don't know. He's very famous. Anyway, but yeah, but Australian, yeah, definitely do. But yeah, in terms of Australian comedians, like you can't go past Celia and Kitty. I think they're amazing.
Yeah, no, they're I've seen Kitty perform and she's just popping on stage.
She's incredible. Like, I just love them. I work with them sometimes, and because we're on a TV show called Utopia, which is a show in Australia that is quite well known. And it's an ensemble comedy, and I play a receptionist. So I got to hang out with them, and I really like them. But definitely, like, part of me is always terrified because I'm just like, oh my god, it's like Kitty and Celia. So yeah.
And can I ask, your show, both our shows were cancelled because of Comedy Festival, and because I've been talking to comedians about this, is that we were like one of the first events to get cancelled just before shit went down. And one thing I so admired about you was that you went so in with promoting about health and safety with COVID. What was your drive? Because your Instagram was just like, bam, guys, do this, get this done. I was so inspired by it.
Oh, well, basically, so when Comedy Festival was cancelled, I'm someone who, like, obviously because I work in political satire, I like always have my ear to the ground on like what is happening in current events. And during the time when everything was getting cancelled, like there was so much information about coronavirus, how it spreads, how it's really easy to spread, and how like if we don't take the right measures, it will devastate the country. And so when that was happening here, when it was first coming here, and they still had pubs and clubs open, what was happening in Italy and the UK is that coronavirus was just hitting them so hard, and they were broadcasting from hospitals with people saying like they just had like people dying, and they were interviewing doctors, and it was a really tragic situation. And I was like, our government, Australian government, was not telling that to the people that live here. Essentially, they're like, it's fine, go to the club, whatever. And I was like, no, because I was like fully reading up and I was listening to podcasts and I was like researching what was happening in other countries. And so I was like, look, I'll just make some graphics and maybe like 500 people will see them and they will probably be my close friends, and maybe that they will stop them from going out. And then I think 2 graphics went a bit remotely viral. I saw 2 of them on Reddit that were doing quite well. Yeah. And then a lot of people came and saw the graphics. But the other thing that was happening in my personal life at that time is, so when the Comedy Festival was cancelled, I had rented out my bedroom in Sydney, which is this room I'm in now. Yeah. Yes. And so I sublet it, but I was also in Melbourne shooting a TV show. And then when that TV show it finished shooting early because the COVID restrictions were brought in. So I had to come back to Sydney early, and I couldn't stay here because someone was living in my room. So I had to stay at my partner's place, and he lives with two 45-year-old goths in a giant warehouse. And when I showed up there, they were not happy to see me. And I kind of was like, look, I don't have anywhere to go, but I did just get off a plane from Melbourne. And they were like, how dare you live here? How dare you stay with us? And I was like, I literally have nowhere else. And so they were really horrible to me for the 2 weeks that I had to stay there to tie me over to get here. So I just sat in like one room of the house, just like stressed out of my mind because I wasn't allowed to leave my little room. Otherwise I would run into one of the goths and they would be mean to me. And it like got to the point where like I wouldn't like, because I would see them, I'd cross paths with them like in the like near the bathrooms or like near the kitchens, because that's where their room was, near the bathroom and the kitchen. And it kind of got to the point where like I like was so scared of them. Like I felt like I had to wait till they went to bed so I could have a shower and use the bathroom and like fill up my water bottle because I didn't want to go there when they were around. And so I was just sitting in my room all day and I was like dehydrated and I was like holding in my pee so that until 2 a.m. rolled around, and then I was like out of there and having a shower and stuff. But that like my mental health really suffered. And as a result, I just put all my energy into making these little graphics because I was like not only mentally like unhealthy from all this weird pressure to do with the goths, but I was also just reading up tons and tons of vital information about coronavirus. And I hope that it helped people. I don't know if it did. I just hope that it did, but I'm glad that I did it. And I think that now, even though things are relaxing, I think people are really capable. Like they know what COVID is doing to the rest of the world now. And I feel like, especially what's happening in Victoria, the government message is being pretty clear on how COVID impacts Australia. So that's one of the reasons I have stopped posting about it.
Yeah. No, no, you're right. I remember now. Your graphics were so clean. It was like,
thank you.
No, it was. That's why you were so different from anyone else sharing information, because it was so clean. Because everyone was just sharing other people's. It was all secondhand, but you took the ownership of it, and that's why I remember. That's why it went viral. You took ownership of it. Maybe.
I think it's just because it had swearing in it, because it was like, don't be a fuckhead, don't go to the club. And then everyone was like, that's funny, it's got swearing in it. Really, the bar is so low for Australian comedians. You just put the F word in there and they're like, that's hilarious. But I think because like the ABC or, the Guardian can't share an article that's got the F word in it. And so people were like, yeah, look at this edgy comic that's got a swear that also is informative. But I also made it because I noticed a lot of my friends were going out to clubs when all the stuff was going down in Italy, and I just felt like they didn't know. So I made a graphic and I tagged them all in it because shame works.
Yeah, and everyone knew in Italy that shit was going down. So yeah. And can I ask, you had done your solo show all around Australia before coming to Melbourne, just before Melbourne. Are you still going to take that show to Melbourne, or are you done with it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I took it to Adelaide and Brisbane. I think definitely when it was first starting in Adelaide, it wasn't a show. It was like a random collection of ideas. And by the end of Adelaide, it had a structure, but still I don't think it was like, by the time you saw my show Nina Oyama Lift, it was like, it had punchlines, essentially. It was snappy. I remember the version that you saw. I feel like I maybe forgot a bit of, whatever. It doesn't matter. But I have ADHD, so I'm like everywhere all the time. But the show definitely, like, by the time it got to Brisbane, it was even better because I introduced a screen and I was having like little jokes on the screen as well as mouth jokes to the audience. But I just feel like it definitely probably needed 1 week at Melbourne or just a couple more trial shows before Melbourne, before it really became like schmick. And so even though Melbourne Comedy Festival was cancelled and I was devastated, obviously, because it is something that I look forward to every year, I think the part of me was relieved because I was like, I had quite a bit of work to do on the show. And
yeah, that was me too.
Yeah, and to answer your question, like, I will be bringing a similar version of the show, but I have been writing a lot, and luckily in Sydney there has been a possibility for me to do stand-up gigs. So I've been kind of trialing new stuff that wouldn't have been in that show, a few coronavirus jokes here and there. that weren't able to be made in the original version of the show because it was February before we knew how bad it was. So
Yeah.
I do think, it will be like a slightly different version, but with the best bits from Adelaide and Brisbane, definitely.
Fantastic. And I'm looking for, and look, I know you're being modest, but I was following you in, I'm not stalking you, but you were posting on Instagram, and, you know, people coming out of your Adelaide shows were really excited by it. You had really great reviews.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, thank you. I honestly, I don't know what I do, and I just hope that people like me, to be honest.
That's a good point. Yeah, get the like and then like the jokes afterwards.
Yeah.
You spoke about goths and, you know, coping and not peeing and waking up at 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom. How have you, what else have you had to do to, you know, have lightness in this kind of really strange world that we're living in 6 months later?
Oh God, I don't know. For the first couple of months of the pandemic, I took it really badly. I was unable to get out of bed. I would binge watch TV series and just not speak to anyone all day. It wasn't a good time. And I felt like I basically had to introduce structure into my life in a way that I haven't before. So something that I have been doing is that I got 2 whiteboards, and now every day, I use one whiteboard and I write my schedule on it. And then I have another whiteboard with all the things that I have to do. And then once I do that thing, I move it from the to-do section into the done section. There's a word for that. I think it's called a something chart. Anyway, I don't know.
Not a flow chart? No.
No, it's called it's some kind of organizational corporate thing, but it's really helped me, I think. And then there's another thing with long-term goals. So I have that, and I also keep a little diary every day where I just this is me. I just went into full OCD mode. I record everything that I eat. I record if I exercise. I record if I clean my room or the house or anything, and I record if I do anything to take care of myself. If I wash my hair, I write that down. And so I know how often I wash my hair. Or if I do a skincare mask, I write that down. So I know, oh, sorry, I've just put my earphones out. But
No.
I just basically have started introducing structures into my life to kind of cope with things. That's not a very funny answer, is it? I should say something funny.
No, it's not funny. We don't need to be funny all the time. You are funny, but yeah, you're deep. Deeper than funny.
I hope so. I sure hope so.
Well, let's talk about diversity in comedy, because you've been working in this industry for a while now, and being a woman and being half Japanese Australian. How has it been for you, and have you seen any changes, or do you think there is progression, or there needs to be more work to be done? Or
oh, dude, there always definitely needs work to be done. I'd say diversity in comedy, it's something that I have seen change over time. When I started out, I was 17 years old, and it was a male dominated culture, and there was I feel like I had a lot of internalized misogyny because I would always be the only woman on the lineup, and all my friends were men. And I feel like my friends who were men at that time, I was friends with not very good people who hated women. And because they hated women, then I was in my brain, I was I hated myself because I was, I was I'm one of the boys, but inside I was this sucks. So I feel and now because I went to Bathurst for 3 years, I did stand up for 3 years in Sydney. Then I went to Bathurst for 3 years, and then I came back. And when I came back, there was so many more women. There's a lot more diversity in terms of queerness and in terms of people of color on the scene. And I felt it was a lot more encouraging. I just feel there's a wealth of people. And one thing that I always joke about is when I maybe 2015, I started doing a joke about being bisexual. And it's a joke that I'd never heard anyone else talk about being bisexual on stage. Right. And people would tell me, they'd be whoa, it's so crazy that you talk about that. And then now it's 2020, and every other fucking 26-year-old, it talks about being bisexual, who's a girl. And I'm just part of me is yes, I threw the first bisexual brick at Stonewall, but also part of me is so glad that that conversation has started, and that the stand-up scene is more progressive in that way. And I found that there are a lot more diverse nights specifically there's a lot of female only nights, there's some queer only nights, and I feel they are the most warm and like fun and inclusive places to play, because they're just excited and they know that like some white guy isn't going to get up and joke about beating his wife, and it's just a much better time for everyone if that kind of person isn't there.
I don't know if I reached out to you ages ago, just before Comedy Festival, to see if you could do my lineup show, which is a SnortCast. And I found out when I started curating my lineups, which was 50-50 men, women, sexuality, culture, race, that the audience became diverse as well. It wasn't, the pub feel, the white guy sitting there watching you test out your work. And that's what excites me about being inclusive, about not just your stand-up or your comedy, but also audience. Because we don't want to perform to the same audience all the time. We want to keep opening. Yeah.
And I also think like if audiences know that they will see themselves represented on a comedy lineup, then they'll show up. Whereas if you just keep putting white guys on a comedy lineup, like you're not going to get a diverse audience enjoying that because it doesn't speak to their experience.
Yeah. We've got some of our audience saying, Mike Barker saying, those goths sound miserable.
They honestly were. I was like, also, how are you 45 years old and a goth? Like, in what universe? Like, I don't understand. It was so confusing. But like each their own. I'm not like judging. I just think I was annoyed at them because they were mean to me. But they did do a very stereotypical goth thing, which is because they lived in a giant warehouse, they would use the warehouse space as like, one of them was like an inventor. It literally sounds like a sitcom. Like one of them was an inventor and would use the middle space to like invent stuff. And he would always listen to The Cure like really loudly.
I love it. But that should be in your show next time about goths and Usama is saying, Nina, you are killing us, and laughter emoji. Armady Man from Sydney said, I was just watching Rick and Marty. Rick and Morty. There you go. So the fan club.
If you like Rick and Morty, you will like YOLO Crystal Fantasy, I think.
Awesome. Anna, can I my question to you next is, because the audience are from LinkedIn and they're always speaking and presenting, but one thing that they crave for is to be funny. What would be your tip to someone who wants to try and put comedy into their speech or presentation?
That's so hard. I don't know. I just think I think my comedy comes from silliness, and I also think comedy is this weird thing, especially stand-up, because you have to like believe that you are funny in order to do it. Like you can outwardly be like, oh, everyone hates me, no one thinks I'm funny, but in order to like sign your name up on that open mic sheet, you need to have a little part in the back of your brain that's like, you're freaking hilarious and you can do it. Like, not only are you hilarious, you can get on stage and you can make a bunch of people laugh. And that's like the little kind of ego voice you need in your head. So I feel like just having that voice in the back of your head that wants to take that opportunity to try and make people laugh, I feel like that's a really good step. Something that a rule of comedy, I feel like, is always punch up, don't punch down. So try not to pick on people that are less fortunate than you. I find that's the best comedy. And that's all my comedy tips for the day.
Thank you. No, I thought that was really great how, we do joke, we do say fake it till you make it. And especially with stand-up, you need to go out on stage as a winner, because the moment you come on stage, the audience will freaking pick you. And unless you are able to convert that smartly on stage and use it as an act to get them to follow you. But yeah, you gotta be, I'm funny.
Yeah, I mean, audiences are like sharks. They can smell fear. I have a friend called Andrew Wolf, and he is like, because I always get really nervous before I go on stage, like every time without fail. And then I get on stage and I'm like, oh, it's fine. I've been here 1,000 times. Like, this is, I love this. But Wolfie, when I used to get really nervous, he would be like, they're just little piggies. They're just little piggies, Nina. They're just going to laugh at everything. You don't have to respect them. You just have to just do your thing. They're just little piggies. And I just thought that was such a funny thing to say. But I think you're right, Dana. Like, there is an element of like, you need to have the confidence to own the audience. But I do think you also need to connect, because I've seen a lot of people go on stage and they've been spick and span and smooth talking, but they don't have that like line to the audience, which I think is really impossible. And that's not impossible. that line to the audience is important. And I think that that's something that you really need to come from, like, it needs to come from an authentic place, your funniness.
Yeah. I've got so we're going to questions now and Q&A with the audience. My question to you, please make us laugh with your that's not a question.
Oh my God, that's a fucking dunk.
You gotta pay for that stuff.
She made me laugh with her question, so I feel like that. I like that. Thank you, Binny.
And someone on LinkedIn did love when you said mouth jokes. So screen jokes, mouth jokes. Love it. Arnold has asked, what is your best and worst stand-up moment?
Ooh, I have to think about that. I think my best stand-up moment was when I played at the Opera House. I did a show called Just for Laughs, which is like an international festival. It started in Montreal, but they did an Opera House version, and I was really lucky enough to do that. It just felt really good, and I was like, oh my God, and it was on TV. But my worst moment, oh my God, I'm trying to think. You know what? I block them out of my brain because, like, you don't want to think about your worst moment in stand-up. I think there is an element of, like, whenever I bomb, if things, like, I think now, like, now that I've done it for long enough, like, if I bomb, like, I feel like I know the right way to kind of, like, get around that scenario to kind of, like, talk to the audience and, like, charm my way back into their good graces. But I feel like, oh my God, I've really got to, like, reach into the annals for this one. Oh no, I do. I remember I once, like, did a gig that was billed as 16 and up, and it was a fundraiser gig, and everyone came for free, and, like, I didn't get paid for it. It was to raise charity for bushfires, but I kind of slipped the C word in there by accident into, like, one of these jokes that I just, like, I meant to change it, but in the heat of the moment I forgot to change that particular word, and it was like posted as 16 and up, and the gig was, like, it was okay, it wasn't great, but afterwards this really old lady came up to me and she was like, how dare you, you're disgusting, and I was just like, far out. So that was probably my worst gig.
It's so interesting. It's an old lady who comes up and is offended that another woman has said it.
Yeah, and I also do think it's, like, it was a gig that was, like, it had a age, like, a recommended age range, and I'm kind of, like, of the view that it's, like, if it's advertised, like, I'm gonna give people what's advertised. I'm not gonna, like, change my gig just because children are there, and, like, that might be a really cynical way to play it, to be like, oh, I'm not gonna be family friendly, but it's like, I got booked on that lineup, people know what I do, and so, like, I don't know, it's, if you have a problem, like, maybe don't bring your children to a gig that's clearly been signposted for a certain age level. But yeah. I also understand where she's coming from. I think if I got to go back in time, I would not have done those jokes.
Gotcha. We've got Usama asking a question. What was the strangest experience you've ever had in comedy, in your comedy journey?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm trying to think. I don't know. This is so hard to.
Yeah, the audience is really, really going for the strange stuff.
I think so. When I first started comedy, there was an alternative comedy room called Fuck Club, and it was spelled PHUKLUB.
Yeah,
and it was just a weird room that had, like, people heckling from the back. Like, the whole premise was that the audience would heckle you, and so it took a lot of guts to, like, go out on stage and have the audience heckle you. And not only would the audience heckle you, there would be two comedians on the back on a mic, and they would heckle you from the back, and they were called Voice of God.
Oh my God, amazing!
Yes, it was like a super crazy comedy night. And then if you bombed, like, if your jokes didn't work, then they would play the Seinfeld theme over the top of you. And if they could see you breaking down, like, if they could see you having a bit of a nervous breakdown or a crisis, then they would play that Simple Plan song that's like, do you ever feel like breaking down? Do you know that song, Welcome to My Life by Simple Plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were a very interesting, like, alternative comedy room. They had all sorts of people come up. Like, they had this woman that would read. She was like an old woman who was a librarian, and she would read erotica that she had written.
Yes.
Erotic fan fiction about other comedians. And so sometimes the other comedians would be there and she would just be reading about how she wanted to be spit roasted by like these comedians. It was very funny.
Oh my goodness.
But I remember, what's like the weirdest experience from that? There was just so many. Like I remember one time there was a girl, my friend Madeline Stewart, actually, she has no arm. She's like missing her arm from here and she has this little bit. And she's really good. You should get her on the show, actually. She's very funny. But
Right.
she was very new at the time and she did a sketch where she was not getting any laughs. And it's really hard to get sketch comedy laughs in this particular room called Fuck Club, especially because the audience is so intense and they will turn people against you. And so she, at one point, she was just bombing, like no one was laughing at her sketch. And then she goes, actually, the reason this sketch isn't working is because I need more chairs. And then the audience was like, more chairs, eh? And then we all got our chairs and we picked them up off the ground and we put them on the stage. And so the stage, people couldn't stand on the stage anymore. It's just like a pile of chairs. People overturned their couches and it just made a big pile of chairs and couches on the stage. And then the MC went on and he was like, well, clearly we can't continue this sketch. And then he's like, well, you know what we can do? And then he sang the Les Miserables overture. Yeah. Because you know that scene where they like have all the chairs and they've made the barricade, and he did that. And then I clearly, like, Maddie, what she wanted to do at the end of her sketch, it was meant to end up with her dipping her like little nub in painting someone's face with like Nutella in a funny shape. And so then the host starts singing like Les Mis, what is it, like red the blood of angry man, and then Maddie with her like little arm gets up and dips a bunch of Nutella and just gives him this like weird Nutella beard, and he's just singing there, and all the chairs are on the stage, everyone was sitting on the ground. It was very funny.
That's so good. That is good. That's why I love live theatre. You never know what's going to happen, even as a performer and as an audience. That is brilliant. And we've got another question. The question is, at what point do you realize you're funny enough to do that line of work?
To be honest, I still don't think I'm funny enough to do this line of work. I'm so confused every day. I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, I don't understand.
Dude, you've been me snort the whole time in this whole interview.
Oh my God, stop. But I think what made me realize I was funny enough, I guess, is that I just started making money from it. And then at some point I got hired on a TV show as an actress, as a comedy show, Utopia.
Yeah.
And then pretty much like directly after I got hired on Utopia, I was given a grant from the ABC to make a web series that was then shown on ABC. And then pretty much straight after that, I was on Tonightly. And so I just feel like it's something that I fell into after years and years of working, like, maybe like the first moment where I realized that like I was funny enough to do it is when I did the Rational Fear podcast for the first time, and I got a really good reception. Like a lot of people were like, wow, they kept being like, you're so talented and have presence. And that's not something I still don't understand it. But at the time I was like, oh, okay, like this is the thing. And then off the back of that one gig, I got a lot of opportunities. Like I was put into a TV writing room when I was 19, and I was putting into the podcast writers room, and people were recommending me for stuff. And so I think that's like the moment where I went like, oh, this is like a viable, I might be able to make it in this industry. But I don't think I actually started making it until like 2 or 3 years ago, really. Yeah. So, and I'm 27 now. So I'd say it was about like 6 to 7 years of just like crawling around in the mud being like, am I good? I don't know. Yeah. Wow. And then at some point I just was like, well, you can't work retail now because you've been on a TV show and you seem to be getting enough writing work to kind of pay your rent and buy you some cornflakes to eat for the week.
I love how you talked about retail, because I'm 35, so looking my age, but I worked for 10 years in retail, and I so hear you. There's a point when you're getting those 9 West shoes from the back room and putting onto another woman's shoe where you go, how is this possible? I've worked on TV and now I'm putting shoes on another woman. brain does. It's good comedy though. It's good comedy.
It is. Oh.
No, you go on. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, when I worked at Cotton On, like, I talk about it all the time. I worked at Cotton On and I worked at Supre, which are like not exactly like cool stores to work at, but I always made a point of not being the manager because like they would always be like, "Oh, Nina, you've been here for about 5 to 6 years now. When are you gonna become a manager?" And I always would be like, "No, I'm always gonna be a casual. Like, I just want to. My goal is to be a comedian, and if I become a manager, then I'm just gonna end up in retail forever." And so, definitely, yeah. That was my little promise to myself. I was like, never become the manager. Always be looking for the other thing that you want to do.
Yeah. Always be casual and flexible to move on to other things without being locked down. We've got a question from Mike. Did she make lots of eye contact? Who were the subjects of her erotica? Okay, he's interested.
This woman's name is Sue Thomas. You can look her up, actually. I think she's got some videos on YouTube.
Right.
She, from the stage, you couldn't really see the back, which is where the comedians hang out. So I don't think she did. And she was often reading out of the book. But it was still very funny. And it was often funny because the comedians that she was writing about wouldn't know that she was gonna say all that stuff about like erotic fantasies about having sex with them. And so it was very funny. Also, she's maybe like in her mid-60s. So she's quite an older woman. She had grey long hair and glasses. Like she looked like a lovely old librarian. And then the filth that would come out of her mouth was incredible.
I love it. And this is the last question before you leave. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time. You're such a cracker. What's next? Because this Sunday you're pitching for Melbourne Web Fest for the review.
Yeah, I am. So that is so random. That is something that like it's a show that I was putting together a grant for with Claire Kavanagh, who's another comedian who I think everyone should check out. She does a lot more sketch than stand-up, but she's very, very funny. And we actually went to high school together, and she says that I used to bully her, which I didn't. I dropped out of high school. Like, I didn't even go there. But, yeah, so we just kind of had pitch footage, and so I was like, look, I'll edit it into a 30-second video, and I was like, it's probably no one's gonna see this. And then we got an email and now we're through. So yeah, I mean, hopefully something comes at that, but I mean, there's 20 other people and I'm sure their ideas are all brilliant, so I'm not banking on it in every way. Currently I'm working in development on a few shows and a few podcasts. Yeah, and there's so much more to come from me, but I cannot talk about it yet until it's announced. But watch this space, please.
Watch this space. And please check out her work. Yes. I love a Vogue pose. Thank you so much for joining us, Nina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Diana.
Thank you. And for everyone joining, thank you for spending time with us tonight on the Snort Cast. We will see you all next week for 2 more new interviews. And before we leave, we'll show you a reel of the SnortCast. We hopefully, after all this lockdown and the pandemic eases, we get to see you live on stage again. Good night, everyone.